What up, Fiction fam? This is Down to Read. My name is Steven, and in today's video we're going to talk about the 13 books I've read so far this year, which also happen to be the first 13 books I've read in the last 25 years. Now, as I said in my introduction to the channel video, which I'll link at the end of this video, not having read anything for the last 25 years is a wee bit hyperbolic. However, it'd be safe to say I've read less than a book a year for the last 25 years, after being an avid reader before that. What got me back into books? Well, to be honest, it was the BookTube community. As you might be able to tell from some of the books on this list that have some heavy BookTube influence. Now, I'll be releasing some more detailed videos on the books I'm going to talk about in this video. However, in this video, we're going to get some short summaries of the 13 books that I've read in my return to reading after 25 years. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the first 13 books that I've read in the last 25 years, kind of, in the order that I read them. Number 1, The King in Yellow by Robert Chambers. Yep, I thought, what's going to get me back into reading? I know, a collection of short stories written in 1895. But when I heard this book heavily influenced H.P. Lovecraft and the first season of True Detective, which I loved, I had to give it a go. The King in Yellow is a collection of short stories, the first 4 of which revolve around a play called The King in Yellow, which if you read the script for this play, sends you mad. Now, a lot of people say that the first 4 stories are the only things worth reading in this book. However, I wouldn't quite agree with that, but you'll have to see the detailed review to find out more on my thoughts on that one. Yeesh. Number 2, Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. Now, this might be a book that you would be thinking would be more on my alley in my return to reading after 25 years. This is a very popular book and definitely a page turner. This book is about 4 retirees who live in a retirement village who solve cold cases, and then a murder happens on their doorstep. When this murder happens on their doorstep, the group put their energy towards trying to solve it, somewhat with the help of the local police. A bit of a whodunit with the cozy setting of a retirement village and some twists that I didn't pick till near the end. Number 3, The House of Leaves, written by Mark Danielewski. Now, this book has become a bit of a cult classic both on Reddit and BookTube. Not so much necessarily for the content of its pages, but the way it's written and the formatting of the pages. The story of The House of Leaves revolves around the Davidson family who move into a house that defies the laws of physics. For example, it's bigger on the inside than the outside, and some other unsettling things like that. Well, the book is kind of about the Davidson family. The book is really a babushka doll of different stories and different perspectives, a babushka, if you will. It also tells the story of Johnny Truant, who has found this text written by another person called Zampano. And Johnny's trying to piece together this text and make sense of it. However, the act of doing this is sending him mad. We see Johnny's interpretations of the text, as well as some anecdotes from his life as footnotes in this book. There's a really interesting way of immersing you in the story via the formatting of the book, by the orientation of the text, or the reference to the footnotes, or flicking between the footnotes and the appendices. I can definitely see how some people went a little bit mad while trying to read this one. Number 4, The Will of the Many by James Islington. This is a fantasy book set in a world heavily based on the Roman Empire. Unlike a lot of fantasy books, which have more of a knights and British kind of setting, which already intrigued me. However, what really pulled me towards this book was the magic system and the class system, where the lowest classes, the octavi, have to cede their will to the higher classes. By ceding their will or giving some of their soul and energy power, the higher classes become exponentially stronger. This class system is referred to as the hierarchy, which has not been good to our protagonist, Viz Telemus, who's trying to get through life without having to cede will and looking for any avenue to avoid that. As part of his journey, Viz attends an academy, which has its own class system and its own politics for Viz to navigate. And I'm just a real sucker for an academy setting, so when I learned about that, I knew I had to pick this book up. Also, it was just a nice change in pace from The House of Leaves. Number 5, The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. Hello, darkness, my old friend. We had a nice reprieve from the darkness with The Will of the Many. However, I'm certainly back into it with this one. You'll see what I've been doing with a lot of these first books is perhaps reading one with a darker tone and then one with a lighter tone, so that it didn't all get too heavy, and I continue to enjoy my return to reading. Written by Ian Banks, this is about a 16-year-old boy who lives on a small Scottish island, isolated from a lot of the world, with a small bridge that connects him and the nearby township. He lives on this island by himself with his dad. His mother left when he was much younger, and his brother's been admitted into a mental institution. This boy, Frank, it's safe to say is not a nice kid. He resents his lot in life and takes it out on animals and other small children, and is just generally not a nice person. Interestingly though, this book is written from the perspective of Frank, so even though it gets pretty messed up in parts, we do often find ourselves ourselves empathizing with Frank as we hear more about his backstory. Frank's brother, who I mentioned was admitted to a mental institution, has actually broken out of this mental institution and is on his way back to the island. Some of the best parts of this book are the phone calls between Frank's brother Eric and Frank, really quite eerie and tense. However, I would warn this book is quite dark and has references to animal violence and violence against young children. Number 6, The Stand, a book by a little-known author called Stephen King. The Stand is by far the thickest book I read this year. It tells the tale of a post-apocalyptic world where a virus has wiped out 99% of the population. While the book is mostly set after this virus, the beginning of the book does tell the story of how this virus spreads, which really helps give some interesting contrasts to the people they become later in the story, and we see some really good character development. The survivors trying to find their way in this new world, or what is left of the world, are drawn towards these two strong supernatural powers. These powers speak to the people through their dreams. Number 7, 1984 by George Orwell. Apparently this is the book that people most lie about reading, and the book that people quote the most without having actually read it. You know, like, oh, this is all a bit 1984, isn't it? How do you mean? Oh, you know, like dystopian, Big Brother, all trapped in a house and all that. You haven't read 1984, have you? No. And frankly, I didn't want to be that guy. This classic tells the dystopian story about Winston Smith, who works for the Ministry of Truth in the area of the world previously known as Great Britain, now Airstrip 1, part of this empire, Oceania. In Oceania, Big Brother and the party control the society that Winston lives in via constant surveillance and this organization called the Thought Police. The purpose of this constant surveillance and the Thought Police is to ensure there's no independent thought and also ensure that everyone conforms to the party's beliefs. Now, this definitely isn't a political channel, but sometimes our lives are all a bit 1984, aren't they? We shall prevail. Books 8, 9, and 10, and I've grouped together because they're all part of the same trilogy. The First Law trilogy. Book 8, The Blade Itself. Book 9, Before They're Hanged. And Book 10, The Last Argument of Kings. These are grimdark fantasy books, which if you don't know what that means, they have more morally grey characters and they're a bit grittier perhaps than your run-of-the-mill fantasy book. I think the grimdark came from the slogan of Warhammer 40,000. Bit of trivia for you. This trilogy of books follows a wide cast of characters ranging from a northern barbarian who seems to be forever finding himself moving from battle to battle, fight to fight, and a nobleman who lives in the nation's capital whose biggest worry is a fencing tournament coming up. What I think is the best part about these books is the character development as the stories progress. There's also a good amount of dark humor, which never hurts. Number 11, The Last House on Needle Street. I don't know how I've done this, but Katharina Ward is somehow the only female author I've read in these first 13 books, something I'll be looking to change for the second half of this year. This is a horror book told from the perspective of 3 characters who live on a house on Needle Street. Ted and his daughter Lauren, as well as their cat Olivia. Yeah, you heard me right. There's some chapters in this book that are told from the perspective of a cat. The other main character in the story is a lady named Dee who's trying to find out what happened to her sister who went missing many years ago. The best part of this book for me were the twists, which had me changing my perspectives of characters and my opinions on characters between chapters. Number 12, Recursion by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi thriller that tells the story of 2 main characters, Helena, a neuroscientist who's looking into the ways that the mind and the memories work with the objective of trying to help Alzheimer's patients, including her mother, and Barry, a detective in New York City who's looking into cases around false memory syndromes, which is a syndrome where people have these memories of lives they didn't live. Blake Crouch has a way of writing that makes you almost believe these fictional science theories which form the basis for his books. Number 13, Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. Once more into the bleak. Although I enjoyed all of these books to varying degrees, which you can of course hear more about on the individual detailed reviews that will be coming out in the coming weeks, I have realized as we've gone through this list that there's probably quite a few bleak stories that I've read in the first half of this year, and maybe I'll try to make the second half a wee bit cheerier. This book is set in France around the mid-1300s at the time of the Black Death, or the bubonic plague. This tells the story of an excommunicated knight, a priest who doesn't quite follow all the rules of the Bible, a mysterious young girl, and their journey across France. Their journey is told against the backdrop of Lucifer and his fallen angels rising up and waging war against heaven. As part of this war, they've brought monsters and demons and the like to the realm of man, to our world. This book, as you might expect, has some really strong biblical imagery and references. A lot of people compare this book to the game Elden Ring, which I love. However, I would say this book is actually a lot bleaker than Elden Ring, at least for me. It wasn't so much the interactions with the demons or the monsters that I found the scariest or the most unsettling. It was the interactions between humans and the way they treat each other in this desperate time. Okay, so that's it. Those are the first 13 books I've read in the last 25 years. Kind of. If you'd like to hear more about these 13 books, you're in luck. I'm going to be releasing some detailed reviews over the coming weeks, being released in the order that I read the books. There'll also be some TBR videos and some other fun videos splattered in there, so stay tuned to the channel. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more of this content, please subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Zhoosh! Zhoosh!